Folks, welcome to another exciting installment of the only podcast about action movies in the known universe. It is, of course, Going Commando. This is episode number 11. My name is Brian Yancey. With me, as always, my co-host who, if I had $1 for every time I've heard this man say to a stranger, "Okay, pussy face, it's your move," I'd be a millionaire.
Yo,
it's James McDonald.
How are we doing? Oh, it's going good, man.
How's it going, buddy?
Good. I like that, dude. I might again. I think I'm just gonna need to pay you to like precede me and into places and just introduce me like that all the time. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you could always just pull the clips from the show, or I could just send them to you, and you can just, use them for what you will. Like, I really don't care. I'm happy to do whatever's necessary on my end.
All right, buddy, I appreciate
to make that dream come true for you. So, last week we talked about Predator, and this week, at James's urging, we're going to talk about Predator 2. But before we get into that, let's talk about social media. Going Commando Pod is our handle on Instagram and Twitter. You can follow us there. goingcommandopod@gmail.com. If you go to our link tree in our bio on our social media, there's a Discord server there as well that you can peruse. Post weird things in it, and I'll see them and probably react to them in some way, shape, or form. We'll do more with that at some point as the show kind of goes on, but it's up there now. Go check that out. Yeah. So how you doing, man? You talked last week about some issues you were having with you alluded to something that it was a masterful tease on your part, because I know what it's about, but I don't think anybody else could have ever guessed what it was. So do you want to tell the class about it this week?
So it's really simple, and now looking back at the hindsight, it's not as big of a deal, I guess, as I probably made it out to be. But like you, and I'm sure a lot of people, with COVID and all the expenses and everything, we do a lot of grocery deliveries and things like that. So money's not readily available, and I had a little bit of a mechanical issue with my my vehicle, and but it ended up costing me about $1,100. Yeah, I wasn't happy about that. No, and it kind of sucks, man.
That's not great.
The real kick in the ding with the whole thing is that it's something that on like an older car I would have done myself. Not super difficult, not really hard, but with modern cars, like, you can't just pull a part out of like the transmission, for instance, and replace it. You can do that, but then you have to go in and like hook up to the computer and tell the car like, no, we fixed this. It's cool. Otherwise, it still won't function with a good part. So I don't have the knowledge to do that side of it. So, of course, I had to pay somebody to do the entire job, which is expensive. Yeah.
That's
dude,
a
it
shame.
kind of sucked. But, what are you going to do? Just one of those things.
Yeah, need a vehicle. There's not much you can do, unfortunately. So, I get it. I've, it's been a while since I've had a car of my own, but I definitely can empathize with the pain. I've been through similar situations before where, it just happens, and it's like, oh, okay, $1,100, poof, just gone like that. That you weren't expecting to have to spend anytime soon, or maybe ever. And yeah, it sucks, man. Like, you could, you could buy a lot of shit with $1,100.
Yeah.
That'll get you a lot of Funko Pops, or like
beer, definitely cover
want.
a lot.
So,
it's like a month's rent on the dot for me, so that kind of sucks. But like I said, it is what it is, and what are you going to do? You just kind of got to roll with the punches. But it was much more upsetting when we recorded last time, because I was looking at this whole proposition of not knowing what it was and what it was going to cost, and thinking like, man, this is going to cost like $2,000 or $3,000 to fix. I guess I got a little lucky in the fact that it was only $1,100, but still, it sucks.
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, the idea of the unknown, and it had just happened that night when we recorded. And I got to say, man, you're a trooper. I put the show together. It's a great show. Doesn't sound like anything's wrong with you. So You're a true professional podcast journalist, and I appreciate your professionalism, even in these trying times.
It's really nothing. Like I was telling my girl, you know, she got really upset too, and I was like, you know, hun, it's just one of those things. It's a mechanical vehicle. The more you drive them, the more you wear them out. Eventually, something's going to go. So, yeah, I guess in hindsight, it was a little bit of neglect on our part. We should have had some cash set aside for such an emergency, but we did not. So,
I mean, it's tough to set cash aside. You know, when to your point, during a pandemic, despite the fact that the pandemic is happening and is continuing to happen with no end in sight. The cost of living has not stagnated. If anything, it's continued to rise, just the way it was before. And you know, that's just the way it goes for so many people.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, ourselves included, I think. So, you know, I understand how you feel. I'm sure our listeners will as well. So, anyway, what is your OnlyFans link now that you're at $1,100? Are you going to? What do we say it was going to be the other week?
Yeah.
Something about like a bear.
I'm kind of fixating on like Honey Bear. So maybe like Honey Bear 321.
Honey Bear, that's what it was.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Honey Bear 321.
If it's not already
it's got a nice ring to it, so look forward to yeah, I mean if that's the case, then we'll have to, I guess, recalibrate our strategy. I say as if like I have anything to do with this, but you know, if you do duty my help,
absolutely.
Let me know.
Speaking of social media, since you segued into that, and okay, so this is just an opinion, and it's kind of funny. I don't know if you followed any of the things like yesterday that happened. I guess where Disney fired Gina Carano, who was one of the actors on The Mandalorian. Okay, so
yeah, I did see that.
This is neither an agreement or whatever of her opinion. I think what she said was disgusting, but it just kind of boggles my mind now that celebrities are so willing to say things on their social media platform, knowing of the potential backlash, yet they still post these things. Like, I mean, I don't know, man. It sounds strange to me. Like, if you told me, like, oh, don't say this thing online, your job might depend on it, even if I thought something, I'd probably keep my fucking mouth shut. is my feeling on this. But you see it every day where people just, like, open mouth, insert foot.
Yeah. No, dude, posters got to post. It's posters brain. I know all about it, you know? That's just the way it goes. And, you know, she... bless her heart. That's all I gotta say. But you know, if you're, you know, to your point, if you're working for a company as big as Disney, and you know, you gotta have some, you gotta put like some self restrictions. You have to have some sort of mindset to, again, say, hey, maybe I shouldn't say this, even though I think it's true for some crazy reason. You know, I mean, who could say? Maybe she got hit in the head too many times, or, you know, like too many, got choked out too many times, and like, you know, her brain like lost oxygen too many times. I mean, who knows? Obviously, she's very stupid, and we don't condone anything that she said. And but yeah, I mean, you know, celebrities. The other thing though is, in a way, I mean, it's not going to replace being a cast member on a show as popular as The Mandalorian, but in a way, when this stuff happens and these celebrities get quote unquote canceled, which is not actually what's happening, but that's like the best description I can think of it. It almost like empowers, empowers them in a way, or it can. And it can draw like new people to this person who are also out of their minds and believe, you know, the things that she was saying. And, you know, what that could lead to, I don't know. But that's another weird thing about this age of social media, where, you know, a famous person can say something extremely reprehensible to 99% of anybody with reading comprehension skills. And yet there's always going to be someone who is going to loudly defend them no matter what. And I don't know where that comes from, if it's like internalized guilt or just brainwash, denial. I mean, who can say? But it's
Agreed.
definitely strange. And every time I see shit like that, I just think like, and sometimes I have to admit, I get a little caught up in it. And I will like reply to these chuds, and I'll say something like, "Oh, like I hope she sees this, bro," or something like that. And it's like, why are you spending your time like defending someone who does not give a shit about you and doesn't know who you are, will never know who you are, and it's weird. It's really weird. But I guess in a way, uh, in the same way, social media is kind of like torn down that wall in a way, right? Where even though a lot of these celebrities with these big followings are probably not reading their replies or their Instagram comments or whatever, because it looks like you're just like talking to this person directly. These people feel like they can just say whatever to them and feel like they're doing a good thing, when in reality they're just completely wasting their time and probably poisoning their brains even more than they're
I think
already
that's
poisoned.
true.
So, but as the late Larry King might say, that's just my 2 cents.
Some people's 2 cents are more valuable than others, though. So,
That is true.
So, anyways, let's tell the folks what we're talking about today.
Yes. So this is a special episode, you might say, because this was not in our initial plans. We're very structured here at Going Commando. We planned far ahead, and we had, I want to say, a list of like 5 or 6 movies that we were going to do in order. We had the show mapped out until like mid-spring, pretty much, and Predator was one of those movies that we did for our 10th episode. And on the air last week, you mentioned quite a few times, and I only know this because I finished editing the episode today, like about an hour ago, that we should do Predator 2, and we should do Predator 2 this week, back to back, and also release the episode a week early. So this is coming out a week sooner than it normally would. You're welcome, everyone. So let's talk about Predator 2, 1990, starring Danny Glover. And what is your personal history with this one?
The first Predator movie. I remember seeing it. I could tell you where I was to some extent when I saw this movie. It's probably like 91 or 92, and we were still living in West Virginia, and I remember watching this movie with my dad. And I think it was on like television at the time. So like I think it went basically from like theaters to being on like network TV pretty quickly, because my dad wasn't one to like we didn't have cable. He wasn't a pay-per-view kind of guy, so I'm sure that it could have been rented. I don't remember, but I remember watching it and thinking, okay, this is not Arnold, but at the time I think that's probably what disappointed me the most, is because it was a Predator, but he wasn't fighting Arnold. And recent years, as I've kind of rewatched it a couple times, I have a little bit more respect for this movie than I think I did back then. It kind of gets a bad rep as being a bad movie.
Okay.
But in all honesty, it's in the hierarchy of the Predator movies, at least, it's, in my opinion, at least the second best. It trumps anything made after it came out. So,
yeah.
I tell people, hey, give it a rewatch. I think it might be better than you thought it was.
Yeah. I mean, so I had never seen this movie before I watched it a few days ago, and which I think is another reason why you wanted to do this special episode. But what struck me about it is that, and to your point, I can understand why people who were such big fans of the first one rejected this one initially, because it is so incredibly different. I mean, the differences are really night and day. Virtually everything about it is different. But for me, a guy who has, less familiarity, less fandom, you might say, of this franchise, I thought this movie fucking ruled. I had a lot more fun watching this one than I did the first one, to be quite honest with you. So that's just, that was my experience with it. It's interesting because so it comes out in 1990. So this is post RoboCop, and this movie lifts a bunch of tropes from RoboCop, I think, but does them in a way that is not satirical in the same way, or even at all. From like the news cameras, the news anchors, what's his face, the hardcore guy, all the news footage and like the futuristic. I mean, the only thing futuristic about this movie is that they just tell you that it's the future. There's not really anything else like established with that, but I thought that was an interesting parallel, I guess. Yeah, this movie's great, and I agree. Like, if you're a fan of the franchise and you haven't watched it in a while, I would say revisit it. It's probably better than you remember it, and I think it's definitely corny at times and over the top and a little ridiculous, but yeah, it's just really entertaining. So I had a good time watching it. I really did.
Reiterate what you said. I thought the script was written really well. I think the movie was shot really well and paced very, very well. From the time that Danny Glover's character first sees the Predator till the end of the movie, it's paced pretty quickly, and there's a nice build up, but it's not boring.
Yeah.
A lot of movies have a really long build up to the climactic end, but it gets kind of boring. This movie kind of does a really good job of keeping your attention and kind of investing you in other characters besides just the lead.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that, again, I just think the contrast between main characters we go from Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dutch in the first Predator, this extra strong military special ops guy who's a total fucking badass, totally unflappable, and as scary as the Predator is, there's never really much doubt as the viewer that Arnold is going to prevail, in some way, shape, or form over this beast. But you contrast that with Danny Glover as Mike Harrigan. He's like an average Joe, everyman, right? He's a cop, but he's not like a big roided out muscle dude. He's just like a classic 80s 90s cop movie, loose cannon police officer type, which I think is a really cool contrast between the two, and definitely sets a much different tone for the way this movie shakes out. And Danny Glover, man, hats off to you. He's a fucking legend. He's great. He's so great. I mean, he's, again, I feel like I bring this up on the show a lot, but in a vacuum, he's probably not a good cop, like a lot of these cops that we see in these movies. But for what this movie is and the tone that it's setting, it's perfect. It's completely perfect. So I appreciated his work in this movie. He's a good enough actor to elevate a movie like this that in other hands, acted by another lead, could probably be something a little less good, like more of a B movie level.
Quality, I'll
I would
totally
say.
agree with that. It's kind of funny too, is that this movie was he got to reunite and work with Gary Busey again. They'd previously worked together in Lethal Weapon, and I thought they had really good chemistry for their parts.
Yeah.
And Gary Busey, God love that dude and his crazy ass, but he's perfect role as this, just kind of hotshot scientist who's there trying to capture this thing. It was a really unique and interesting character. I kind of wish they'd have done a little bit more with his character.
Yeah, I mean, it's sorry to cut you off. I just it's funny you mentioned that, because I didn't realize this until I was doing my research for this recording, that the initial idea was to have Arnold come back and play that role that went to Gary Busey, but I guess it wasn't substantial enough for him to want to do it. So they ended up casting Gary Busey in it instead, and kind of rewriting the character as, to your point, this guy who's some kind of government agent who's trying to catch this predator. Continue.
And you're right. Arnold was initially, I guess, in talks to take that role. And I think a couple things probably kept him from doing so. One being obviously that the character's part in the movie was very small and a supporting actor. And at the time, we're talking 1990 Schwarzenegger, 89, 90 Schwarzenegger. And he, at that point, had become a leading man. He wasn't going to play second fiddle in a movie to anybody else. And I don't know whether or not that's him being conceited, but I mean, at the time, he was definitely bankable as being the guy. So I think there's probably a lot of factors. I know that he was also filming T2. He was scheduled to film T2. And there was some scheduling conflicts there. And I think he said in an interview he also didn't want his character to be, unceremoniously dispatched after beating one predator to be dispatched in such an easy way. And to his argument, I can see that. I can say I agree with that. I can't imagine taking his character Dutch, who was lovable character. Good chemistry. Everybody liked him. Very resourceful. Was able to beat the predator with shit that he found in the woods, essentially trees like that. And now we're going to give him like the best equipment in the world, and he's going to be, really quickly dispatched in a meat locker. I'm in agreement. I don't think it was a good call.
No, I mean, yes, I'm sure that he read that part of the script and, read the last page of that character's script. And, realizing that and then watching how the scene is shot and how it plays out. You can totally understand it, because that death scene in particular is hilarious, I think. Just, you see Gary Busey, you see his character Keys, and he's like between these these like meat carcasses, and he's got his little suit on, but when the predator throws that fucking I don't even know what I mean, I called it a boomerang in my notes because like it boomerangs back to the predator, but I know that's not what it is, but it's like it's almost like a saw blade, like a table saw blade.
Kind of, yeah. It was
from space.
Kind of a neat cutting implement. I was looking at it later on when Danny Glover's character gets it and uses it. I was like, man, that's cool. Whoever thought of that had a really good idea. Very creative.
Yeah, very creative. Yeah, but like the way that scene is shot, his death scene. I don't think I've ever seen a movie death like that in my life, where it's just like it just looked like somebody had a bucket of like red liquid and just like dumped it on the ground, and that's how much blood came out when his body was bisected by that weapon. I was like, that. What was it? Is this guy all blood and no guts? Like what the fuck happened there?
Well,
like,
something that you got to remember, and this is just looking at it from a practical standpoint. My medical background. A lot of people don't know. I am a nurse, but a lot of people also don't know that I went to school to be a paramedic, and I've seen some pretty gruesome stuff, and I can definitely attest to the fact, like if you cut something like a descending aorta like that, which is what would happen if you totally cut somebody in half, there's going to be a lot of blood, really, really quickly. I mean, maybe not quite like somebody dumping a 10-gallon bucket of blood, but probably.
Yeah, I mean that's what.
But it's it is going to be very bloody. I thought it was a really kind of unrealistic death in some ways, but I mean it's fitting for the movie. The Predator's supposed to have these crazy advanced weapons. It's totally believable that he would be able to have this thing that he could chuck at somebody and just split them in half. So. Absolutely. Within the context of this movie's universe, it makes perfect sense, but it really made me laugh, so I just figured I'd bring it up. But I mean, that's another thing about this movie that I think, to me, it exceeds the original, is the supporting cast. You've got Gary Busey. You've got Bill Paxton. When I was watching this movie, and he shows up in this thing, I'm like, man, you know what? I really fucking miss this guy. I miss Bill Paxton so much. He's just like so good, or he was so good. God rest his soul. He was so good at playing this kind of like smarmy moron in a really funny and convincing way. I mean, he did it here. He did it in Aliens. He did it in True Lies. He basically made a career out of it, you might say. And I mean, he's just the best. I loved him in this movie. I was always a big fan of Bill Paxton. Not really a leading man of sorts. Although, he did have some starring roles and some really, leading man type characters. So it's not completely out of the realm of his wheelhouse, I guess. But he was very good at playing, like you said, this kind of like goofball, maybe like scuzzy, but ultimately lovable, moron of sorts. And same thing with this character. Like, you enjoy watching this character. even though he made some questionable
Yeah.
jokes and said some questionable shit in the movie. Again, let's go back. It was 1990. You could get away with saying a lot more and doing a lot more in movies back then because everything wasn't so PC. So, I'll give him a break on that.
No, it's true.
Plus the guy's dead. I think when you die, you get a pass on certain things. As long as you weren't actually physically hurting somebody.
So I go in for my physical, right? And the doctor says, I need a semen, stool, and urine sample. I say, gee, doc, I'm in a big hurry. Can I just leave my underwear?
But he was great.
Yeah.
And I think I've said this before. He has a distinction that nobody else, at least at this point in Hollywood, has. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was that he's been killed by the Terminator, the alien,
Yep. He's
and the Predator.
The only person in Hollywood that has that distinction, right? At least at this point. I mean, it could happen later on. I'm sure Hollywood's not going to let any of those franchises die as long as they can milk it for a little bit of money. So, see what the future brings. But up until now, he still has that distinction. And his death scenes in all the movies are really interesting and cool. I can't remember how he's killed in Aliens, so forgive me for that. But I know that, the Terminator basically rams his whole fist through his guts and kills him. And then, in this, he's basically eviscerated. Yeah. So, cool death scenes.
Yeah, no, I really do like, and I think this is, again, a tribute to, Predator 2 is set in Los Angeles, and not the jungle, the concrete jungle, you might say. So, Jerry Lambert, who is Bill Paxton's character, his death occurs on the subway, and it's the way that whole scene is shot is just really cool with like the kind of like strobe light like effects. Sets it apart in the same way where I think in the first movie where you're more afraid of the Predator as an unknown quantity than anything else. It's very dark and mysterious and scary in that way, and like kind of frenetic and frantic. So I really liked the stuff in the subway, and it's just so different from the first movie to see a Predator in such an urban setting like that. Very, very cool. And he, like, again, Paxton's great in that scene. I like it when he goes up to the punks and he says, "Oh, like loosen your sphincters. We don't need any rush hour Rambos here." It's like great line. Yeah, it's a hell of a scene. Hell of a way to go. So salute to Bill Paxton for getting eviscerated by the Predator on the LA Metro.
Yeah, man.
Much respect.
I think you said it just probably more eloquently than I previously did. I think he was great in this movie. That's another one of those characters that, I can't really see a whole lot of other people playing that way. There's a lot of people who can play a real scuzzy character like that, who's likable but kind of sleepy.
Yeah.
But he pulled it off in a way that, like, when he dies, you're like, okay. He died, and he died a heroic death too, which is kind of cool because you know what I thought was really neat about the scene is because of the way they shot it, he was at the other end of the car, and the people were evacuating the opposite way. So I don't know if you noticed, but as he starts to shoot the Predator's cloaked, obviously. So you can see him shooting at the open door of the crowd, but you can see the actual shots. So, like, if you were a bystander in that other car, you would think that somebody at the other end of that car was shooting at you, which was kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's super creative. I mean, there have been, at this point, like many action movie thriller shootout scenes, like in subway cars and subway trains, but I can't think of one that I enjoyed more than this one. And what I also like about it is that it does show, unlike in the first movie, it does show that the Predator, even though the Predator is a hunter of man, the Predator does have some morality because he realizes that Leona is pregnant and lets her live, which I thought was interesting. I guess there was a lot of stuff cut out of this movie, and there was probably more to that subplot in the original cut, because it's not really mentioned before, it's not really mentioned after. So, but again, it's really just there to show that the Predator has standards as far as like who he's hunting.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. And you're right. It does show some morality from the Predator, and having kind of like a code of conduct and a code of honor. That he realized that she was pregnant. He's like, okay, I'm going to let you go. So I thought that was pretty cool. I want to talk about another scene because I thought it was really cool. Was the scene where Harrigan goes to meet
King Willie.
Yes, King Willie. I thought that was a really cool scene. The lead up to that scene, how they just randomly pulled up on the street. He hops in the car and they drive away, and then like he ends up in this random alleyway in downtown LA somewhere. I will say that while it's a really great scene, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Like, why would King Willie meet him in a random alley when he could have like had him taken anywhere? Like, why would you not take him to like a warehouse or something? You know, but to meet him in like this random alley out in the middle of like public and where anybody could kind of wander in on the conversation seems a little weird.
Yeah, I guess the only logical thing I could point to answer your question is like maybe because Harrigan's a cop and King Willie's a gang leader, you know, they don't want to take this police officer to, I guess, like their headquarters or, you know, wherever they do whatever they do. So, you know, they take him instead to a place that's like a neutral site, right. Essentially, where he can't possibly get any sort of intel as to
right.
where they're operating, right? But that scene is cool. The beginning is a little stereotypical. I mean, you got the Jamaican guys pulling up in the car, and there's so much weed smoke in the car that you really can't see anything else except smoke, which, you know, is. I mean, again, it's 1990. It's fine. But that's a cool scene. And, you know, King Willie, to his credit, does try to warn Harrigan about, you know, this predator. And then I do like the way that his death is shot in the sense of we basically just see his head and his mouth is open, right? King Willie. And then the camera pans out and you see that it's actually his decapitated head and the predator is carrying it. And he's got this like extremely frightened look on his face. I was like, oh, okay. There's some artistry to this.
Really
I like
cool,
this.
Just the angle in that shot there, because I mean, like he yells out like, you know, he's about to face off with the predator, and he has the exact same face as he died. Yeah. So it's kind of a neat neat camera angle, neat detail to have this like look of like pure fear just etched on his face, you know, from death. And we were talking about this, and I don't remember what, it must have been on the last one, how they kind of give you a little bit more backstory in this about how long the Predators have been kind of doing this. You know, and they show you other things, obviously. You know, like in his trophy room, they back out and pan out, and you can see all of these other creatures that you can't quite make out. You don't know what they are. But there's one that is very, very recognizable as you start to pan out. And it's essentially what connected those two universes. And that's this xenomorph skull that's on the wall, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if initially when it was written, I can't find any information on this, if they planned on doing a shared universe. They did make a video game back in the 90s, but they didn't make a movie until like the early 2000s. 2003, 2002, something like that.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I mean, I was doing my research for this episode, and most of what I saw about that particular cameo of the xenomorph skull, for lack of a better term, is that they really just intended it as like a joke, like an inside joke. So, you know, I mean, maybe they're just kind of like playing it off, or maybe that's actually all it was, and then it just kind of led to, you know, what it is now or what it has been. But, you know, obviously they were both 20th Century Fox properties, so, you know, it's not like they could get sued by the studio.
Right.
It's the same studio. So I guess they figured, we can get away with it, so let's just put it in there and see what happens.
But it's kind of cool, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, if they're hunters, they're not just going to hunt. They're not just going to hunt humans. They're going to hunt other more challenging game as well. And I mean, you know, as far as like a big bad from outer space goes, the xenomorph is pretty high up there. Yeah,
doesn't get much bigger, doesn't get much badder, my friend.
It was really cool. It was probably like you said, probably done as a joke, and they didn't think anything of it. And the way people reacted, they were like, well, maybe we can make this work.
Maybe
we can make a couple $1 million off of this.
Yeah, maybe. You know, just like something there. I don't know, but No, I thought that was cool. I mean, obviously, hindsight being what it is, we've gotten so many crossovers at this point, and I'm sure there's more on the way. Yeah, I had mentioned last week that I didn't really. One problem I had with the first Predator movie was the supposed the Predator's lack of established motivation, right? Why he's there, why he's hunting, why he's doing what he's doing, and you do get a little bit more of that in this movie from the closing fight scene on the spaceship that we just talked about briefly, and then there's some exposition from Keyes before they're while they're tracking the Predator inside the slaughterhouse. That kind of explains, kind of ties the two movies together because this one takes place in a not so futuristic 1997, so 10 years after the events of the original film, and I appreciated that. I thought that was nice to kind of like flesh out the universe a little bit more and give me, the stupid viewer, a better idea of what the Predator's doing, why it's doing what it's doing. Yeah, I appreciated that. So I thought that was nice. I appreciated that as a viewer.
It's a good bit of information that you don't get from the first one. What I like about this movie is you didn't really need to see the first movie to be able to watch this movie, because even though obviously there's
yes.
It's a sequel, there's really no tie-in. There would have been had Arnold, obviously reprised his role, and you probably would have needed to see. Well, you probably still wouldn't even need to see that, to be honest. But I thought it was a good little bit of tie-in there. Going back to talking about specific scenes, so something else they did in Predator 1 that they did here was the Predator's medical paralysis as far as treating himself with an injury. And I thought it was really neat how they did this. How he basically flies through the window of this person's apartment and takes household items from around the bathroom to treat himself. I thought it was kind of astounding that neither one of them heard somebody crash through the wall of their apartment, even though it was probably right next door in the bathroom.
I mean, it seemed like the old lady did. She got the broom out, but Jeopardy was on, the volume was all the way up. They're old. It's fine. I can excuse that a little bit. It added a nice bit of comic relief in the middle of a pretty climactic ending fight scene between the Predator and Danny Glover's character Harrigan. So I thought that was cool. This movie definitely has a lot more comedy in it, I would say, than the first one, which basically had
it's got a lot more moments of levity in there to kind of keep it from being so dark. I think if they'd have come at it from the same lens as Predator 1, it might have ended up being a little too dark, perhaps, for the time. Not now. I mean, it would have been fine now, but for the time, for 1990, it might have come across as too bleak and dark. But,
sure.
I laughed when I watched the whole scene with him, in the bathroom, and he's got no arm now. He's missing an arm.
Yes.
He starts making this concoction out of what looks like tile and some gel that he cooks up and then just slaps on his stump like one of those old timey prospectors who cuts off a hand and then stuck it against the coal stove and cauterized everything. It was kind of an interesting scene. Kind of shows that these things are tough as nails, and even though he's missing an arm now, you still shouldn't take him lightly. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he basically just cauterizes his arm wound in this fucking bathroom with just to your point, a hodgepodge of ingredients, and it's man, all right, that's pretty badass. But I had a thought today about Danny Glover in this movie. That he was in Lethal Weapon, as we all know, playing Murtaugh to Mel Gibson's Riggs. But in this movie, he's playing a cop, but he's almost playing more of a Riggs-like character in this movie than a Murtaugh-like character. He's out of his goddamn mind and doesn't like his superiors, hates authority, Well, he likes authority in that he's a cop, but he hates the authority figures above him. Pretty much wants to be able to do whatever he wants, regardless of who's around him or who it hurts or whatever. And we don't really get like any backstory about him as a character. The movie just kind of starts, and he's, these two gangs, the Jamaicans and I believe the Colombian gang, are feuding in Los Angeles, and it's hot out. That's why the Predator's there. They're in the midst of a heat wave, and he just shows up and crashes his fucking cop car like in the middle of this gang war, and just starts going to work. And like that's how it starts. That's all you really need to know. We don't get any glimpse of like family life or friends. Like his only friends are his coworkers, really. So I thought that was interesting. That's like an interesting way to kind of position that character as, because like his role in Lethal Weapon is so iconic that if he was just playing the same character more or less in this,
right.
I mean, what would the point be? But he's not.
Right.
Extremely different.
And
it's
I think
like
that was kind of the point, to start out with, like, your first introduction to him is him, like, slamming his car through, like, this street full of cars and doing something very heroic, but, like, incredibly, incredibly dangerous to try to save these other officers who are down. It really quickly establishes what the character is all about and the kind of lengths he's willing to go to solve the problem, as it were. So I think it's cool. And to your point, if he was, a more reserved, like, I'm too old for this shit character in this movie, it wouldn't have worked, because it would have just been too. It'd have been like, oh well, they should have just brought Mel Gibson in here, and Riggs and Murtaugh could have taken down the Predator.
I mean, that could be a hell of a fucking crossover, man. That's an idea. I wonder if that ever got discussed, because that would be fucking sick if they could have finagled that somehow.
We've talked about this before when we've talked about movies of Mel, with Lethal Weapon. Say what you want about Mel Gibson, he's crazy. He says really shitty stuff, and he's probably kind of a douchey person. But the dude's a great actor and a great director. And I think an action movie with him versus the Predator, maybe not even in the Murtaugh role, but him in that movie, especially back in like 89, 90, when he was kind of at like the highlight of his career, like the peak,
mm-hmm.
I think would have been really interesting. I think I could have really got behind that.
Yeah. Book it. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Let's greenlight it. I'm going to Fox right now, or I guess Disney now. We're going to write that script and try to get it greenlit.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
So, you and me, buddy.
Speaking again of like writers and the movie in general, I think this movie was more put together than Predator 1. Well, I still don't think it's as good of a movie overall as Predator 1. It is definitely on its coattails really, really hard, to overtake it. And if you're looking if you want to just say like what movie is probably a more cohesive, better written movie, it's probably the better written movie of the two. I just don't know that it quite measures up to the last one.
I mean, they're again, it's night and day. They're just very different movies tonally. The only thing they have in common is they both have the Predator in them. They're just so wildly different. And where the first Predator is like kind of this kind of like bleak action / horror / science fiction movie, Predator 2 is still scary in places, I would say, but there's less of the unknown factor. There's less empty space, you might say, and it's just different. It's written differently. It's almost like Predator 2 is almost like it's almost like a pulp like crime story. At least that's the way it's shot and written. Even though it's obviously like a science fiction movie, but just like the way that the actors read their lines and the words themselves. It's about like right here. If over the top is like right here, like it's just bubbling below that. It does a good job of kind of like being ridiculous, but never bubbling over the top.
I get what I'm saying.
So,
cool. Again, I don't think I can actually say enough good stuff about the movie as far as if you compared it to any of the movies that come after it. I don't know who was the writer or on the writing team for this movie. I feel like Shane Black could have went back and looked at the previous two movies when he wrote his sequel that come out a couple years ago.
Yeah,
I think these movies were really, really well done. And to your point, the thing about the Predator is once your cat's out of the bag with the first movie, making Predator 2, you basically are you're like, okay, this is our trick. That's the cat. So how do we make it good? Because you can't hide the bad guy anymore. You've already shown him in a previous movie. So how do you get to the end? And how do you make him still? How do you keep that scare factor to it? And I think they do a really good job here, between moments of kind of like humor and being scared. And I honestly think that it might be the reason this movie was written to be in LA, is because taking them back to like the woods or the jungle just wouldn't have made sense. Like it would have been hard to redo that movie and still keep it scary.
No, I totally agree. I think, to your point, that's the whole impetus for changing the setting of this movie, is like, it's not just a reason to put, the Predator in a new place. Like it has to happen, because otherwise the movie's just not going to work. And, watching this now, I kind of wish that this movie Predator 2 had been a little bit better received by critics and had made a little bit more money, because like, if this movie ends up taking off, which it didn't really, in theory, we could have had like several more like standalone Predator movies that are ostensibly sequels, but they just change the setting again, change the cast, keep the Predator there, and just figure out new ways to kind of like, now the Predator's in New York, now the Predator's in, somewhere else. Like, there's, I think, a lot of untapped potential there, that they could still do that or something like it, I think. But I think at this point, maybe just because of the way the last few movies have gone, that's probably not something that they're really considering. But even like a Predator like TV series with like standalone, like almost like X-Files Monster of the Week episodes, where like this week the Predator's in Miami, this week's the Predator's in New York, or like whatever it is. I think something like that could be really cool, done the right way by the right people.
I think really the best way to reboot this franchise, not to get too far off topic, would be to make the movie, promote it as being a horror movie, but not tell anybody what the monster is. Show all the murders and stuff.
Yeah.
And then at the very end reveal, who the killer is. I think that, at this point, that would be the only way I think you could really make this movie like bang. Like, like come out of the like it did in the first one. But I think you're right. I wish this movie had done better. I wish it had been better received by critics. Because overall, I mean, if you put it against a lot of movies that come out the same time frame it did, it's not that bad. There's a lot of movies that come out that were way, way worse than this movie, that did much better in the theaters, and I don't quite understand it. I feel like, I don't want to say this because I hate to go, well, maybe it's a race thing, but if you look back in the early 90s, there weren't too many movies that were big action flagships that were helmed by an actor of color. Before that, Danny Glover was really only known for Lethal Weapon and The Color Purple. I mean, he had a pretty extensive acting career, but he was not really a big name at that point. Even still, at that point he had 2 Lethal Weapon movies under his belt. Because I think Lethal Weapon 2 came out in '89. So at that point he would have had 2 Lethal Weapon movies under his belt.
I believe so, yeah.
But he still wasn't just as big of a name. So in a lot of ways, Fox may have kind of been taking a risk by casting him, even though I think he's perfect for the role. It's unfortunate. That might have been what was detrimental to the success of the movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, there's definitely that element of, just flat out racism, I guess, where, at least, it's, it's really tough to say, but yeah, I mean, do I think that this movie would have made more money at the box office if Arnold Schwarzenegger was the star? Of course. Or Sliced Alone, or, even Mel Gibson. And I think it is a race thing, honestly. And I think that, you could make the argument that it goes all the way back to, just like whenever all these guys kind of got their starts, and they were, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like their movies if they didn't deserve whatever opportunities they got, but there's no doubt in my mind that their race played a big part into why they had the success that they had, because I'm a white guy and I know what it's like to have that privilege. And even though I'm not famous and I don't want to be famous, I can understand like how that works on
Oh,
a kind of
absolutely.
like smaller level.
And again, it's a shame because I think this movie, I think it deserved more than it got. I don't know what it did in the box office. I didn't take the time to look it up, but I know commercially it was kind of a flop, which to me just doesn't make any sense. Because again, I've seen movies make a lot more money than this movie ever come close to making in the box office that weren't even a quarter of as good a quality.
Yeah. So according to Wikipedia, Predator 2 made $57.1 million at the box office against a budget of it says between 20 and 30 million. So it made its money back, but it was far from a smash hit. If I think if it had made 100 million, 200 million, I don't know what the benchmark is, but I guess it wasn't enough to really justify continuing. I mean, obviously they did end up continuing the franchise, but in a completely different way. But then again, like in my mind, and we've talked about this on previous episodes of the pod, but like the way studios operated back then versus how they operate now. If this movie was made today for $20 million and made 57 million, it definitely probably would not get a sequel, right? But a movie that makes back almost twice its budget in this era, that's a success. And to me, like that's good enough to continue it in this vein and kind of keep going with these kind of standalone pictures. But for whatever reason, they didn't do it that way.
And the thing is, this movie sowed a lot of seeds of like, okay, we can go here with this movie, we can go there with this movie. Not to jump too far ahead, but let's go to the end scene. So Danny Glover is, he tracks the Predator down to his ship, which it's still kind of strange that like that's how he got into the ship. He broke a hole in the bottom of the elevator shaft to like hide. How did they get the ship underground to start with without being seen? Like that's a little strange to me. I mean, again, it is what it is, but I think it was kind of a strange detail. But I guess at that point, how do you explain it? So he tracks him into the ship, and they're fighting, and then you get a better look at the xenomorph and all the other creatures as Danny Glover's looking at it, and then there's this kind of one-handed fight. Where Danny Glover has got the little spinning disc thing, and the Predator's got his claws, and they're going at it like an old school sword fight. The Predator thinks he's got him.
Yeah.
He cuts him real bad. Danny Glover's character drops, and he's sitting there, and then like as the Predator's coming up for the kill, he just turns around and just guts him with this, we'll call it the frisbee of death. So. He guts him with the frisbee of death, and then the Predator dies. And then, all of a sudden, boom, all these other Predators come out. And the way Danny Glover's character handles it, he's just kind of like, all right, who's next? Let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what else can you really do?
That's also a really cool look at their culture that really kind of helps explain why they're there and why they do what they do. Because at that point, he's won their respect.
Yeah.
He's killed one of their own in battle. Mm-hmm. Not only did he kill one of their own, but he hunted it back to their ship and then killed it. That's a pretty big accomplishment, I would think, as far as their lore goes. So they just take their dead comrade and the rest of them disappear. But then you get this one old-looking Predator. And the only way you really know he's old is they gray out his dreadlocks a little bit. And he turns around right before he's about to disappear, and he pulls out this old flintlock pistol and tosses it to him and tells him to take it, and then he disappears. I think you only get one or two really good looks at the pistol, but it says on the side of the inscription, Raphael Adelini, 1715. So, in my opinion, like they could have done a sequel where they showed like the Predator back, like in the Old West or in the pirate days. I mean, they really kind of set themselves up for a wide open berth on what they could do with the character, where they could go with sequels, and they just kind of dropped the ball on it.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate. I mean, obviously, it's not too late. It could still happen, especially again, we've talked about this on previous episodes, but studios are overly reliant on franchises, on the characters that they own, the IP that they own, versus, taking a chance on like some like new script or something that has like, that's like unproven. So I think that, anything's possible. And, now Disney owns Fox and ostensibly the Predator franchise, and we'll see what they do with it, but maybe something on Disney Plus. The streaming wars are alive and well. Maybe they could do something there. But I think there's still, the ball was dropped in the 90s, but I think it can be easily picked back up because, again, it's like the Predator, like it's like a costumed character, so there's no aging that has to happen or does happen necessarily. Where you can just like drop them in anywhere and it's fine, even though it's been 30 years since this movie. I think,
I
in the right hands,
agree.
It can work well.
And, I think I kind of touched on this last pod. There's extensive backstory for this character and the franchise via, like, the comic book series. They did a comic book series. I want to say it was produced by Dark Horse. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they go into a whole set of, details on that. They talk about Schwarzenegger's character Dutch. They talk about Harrigan's character and what happens after. Dutch has got this crazy story that goes on in the backstory where, like, after that, like, he goes back to the U.S. and he's kind of debriefed, and then he starts he goes back down to Valverde to try to, like, figure out what happened, but he's, like, suffering from radiation sickness. And then, like, basically him following, like, he meets Agent Keys. There's a really rich backstory there that I think it existed like right after or right around the time that Predator 2 come out. At least most of that stuff did. So there's a lot of story there that, doesn't need to be rewritten. They could just pick up some of this content and go, okay, let's take a look at this and see what we can do with some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about this? Predator reboot. Or no, Predator sequel. Gary Busey playing Agent Keys, resurrected. And one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's sons playing another character. And I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but I've got ideas for this thing that I think we should take directly to the Disney company.
The funny thing is,
and see what they think about them. I don't think Jake is busy. I think he's on board already. I don't even feel the need to ask him. I think he'll want to do it. So.
Busey. He is actually in the Predator, the 2018 Shane Black movie. Yep, and they don't quite say it. I don't think it's ever kind of mentioned verbally, but I think it might be kind of alluded to that he is Agent Key's son. But he's again very unceremoniously dispatched in a very unheroic way. I'm not going to get into details in case you ever decide you want to subject yourself to that. I think unless they just kind of retcon that and basically overlook that, Jake Busey would definitely be gone as an option. But there is another option that they could do that would be interesting. And you could play it off. Like, you could make this work. I don't know if you're familiar with Arnold Schwarzenegger's son, Patrick Schwarzenegger.
A little bit. I see him on Instagram sometimes.
He looks identical to his dad, except for his size, obviously. He's not, nearly as built as his dad.
Yeah.
But he's, he's athletic. He's got the genes. Approach him and be like, hey, how would you like to come in and reprise your dad's role, and we'll just, we'll aid you a little bit with some makeup. And you could shoot him like after, this is what happened to Dutch after Valverde. And you can explain away why he's not as big because, well, he had radiation poisoning. He's sick. I mean, like, the groundwork is there. There's, and like I said, he looks enough like Arnold that it'd be believable. I guess the hardest part might be the accent. I don't know if he can do the accent like his dad has.
I would like to hear his impression personally.
Are you kidding? He has to.
I'm sure he's got one.
He's Arnold Schwarzenegger's kid. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely prefer that over. And we talked about this last week too, but I would prefer that over a scenario where Arnold reprises his role, and they basically just like use like CGI to like make him look younger, like kind of like how they did in The Irishman with like Robert De Niro's character, which like I thought The Irishman was a really good movie. I really enjoyed it, and I think like I think Scorsese is like one of the best American living artists of any medium, director of movies or anything else. But, you know, there's like that scene towards the beginning of the movie where Robert De Niro's character is like fixing his truck, and he's supposed to be like 24 years old, and they like CGI his face to make him look younger, and it's like so strange looking. I don't want to see. I don't really want to see that applied to a Predator movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger in like 2021 or beyond.
That off. I mean,
personally,
for like a big movie like that, I mean, like with a movie like The Irishman, it's a little easier because you're only getting these de-aged scenes. You're not getting like a whole movie where the actor's de-aged.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that would be pretty hard to do for an entire movie and make it look believable. Although I will say I'm always super impressed when I see like the de-aging in movies. I'm like, holy shit, like that is impressive. The most impressive one I think I've ever seen was Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel. He looked exactly like Samuel L. Jackson from 1990 or the mid-90s or whenever. I can't remember what year that movie was supposed to be set in. But, I mean, but then again, you also have an actor in Samuel L. Jackson who doesn't look a whole lot different than what he did in 1990. A little heavier, maybe a little bit of facial droop, but otherwise looks pretty close. Whereas you look at Arnold now versus Arnold in 1987, there's a big difference there. So I think that kind of CGI would be really hard to pull off. And to just another credit, I've seen a couple of Patrick's movies, and they're actually pretty good. He's a pretty good actor. For a kid who's in his mid to late 20s, he's way better of an actor than his dad was early on in his career. You should check out a movie. I don't know if you guys have Shudder. Yeah. If you don't, maybe I can give you my password. There's a movie on Shudder called Daniel Isn't Real. He plays Daniel in the movie. You should see it. It's a great horror movie, really creepy, really well done. But after I saw that, I was like, man, some of these big studios should hook up with this kid and be like, hey, we're going to have you play your dad. I mean, I don't think he wants to be a bodybuilder or anything. But if you start tossing money at the kid, he might be like, all right, well, I could put on 30 or 40 pounds. Why not? Yeah, and I mean, he's I can understand like wanting to kind of like forge his own path, right? But he's got the name recognition, obviously. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that maybe he doesn't want to be compared to his dad and kind of wants to avoid that as much as he possibly can. But at the same time, it's kind of inevitable, especially if he's also going to be an actor. So I don't know. I mean, one thing I will say to that point is that it's another aspect of studios being overly reliant on established characters and established franchises. Is that I wish Hollywood would work a little bit harder to create a new generation of action heroes, like outside of like comic book movies, right? Because like, you still have like, I love John Wick, but Keanu Reeves is no spring chicken. We still got there's like Harrison Ford is doing another Indiana Jones movie. What the fuck? He's way too old to be doing that shit. And I think so, yeah. And there's going to be another Indiana Jones movie that he's going to star in, and presumably like do Indiana Jones shit. I know it was being shot like last winter, like before everything shut down because of the pandemic. So I don't know what the status of that is now, but I'm sure it's still going to happen. He was born in 1942.
But
what does that make him?
1942. He would turn 79 this year if he hasn't already.
I mean, don't get me wrong. For an 80-year-old man, he looks great. He could pull off playing it, but I mean, for God's sakes, like the guy's almost 80. How long does he want to be out there, like jumping off of trucks and cracking a whip as Indiana Jones? I mean, like as cool as it might be, like that's really hard on your body, especially at his age. And there's only so much that you can do with a stuntman and prosthetics to make somebody look believable. So, at a certain point, he's going to have to, give up the hat and whip, and either, they're going to have to retire the character out, or, as blasphemous as this may sound, consider recasting. Which, here's the thing: like, a lot of people are really
Yeah.
like against the idea of recasting characters. I'm not. Even like really beloved characters, like I heard somebody, and I can't remember the argument they made for it, but like Disney basically retired the Black Panther after Chadwick Boseman passed away. I think it's a very respectable thing to do on one hand, but secondary to that, as a comic book fan, I think it's also kind of doing the character a disservice. And I mean, I don't know what Chadwick Boseman himself would have wanted if wanted them to recast the character. But from reading interviews of him, he really loved the character. I don't think he'd want the character to die either. And with the comics, there's comic book characters never die. The question is, how long are they going to be dead? They're not going to die and stay dead.
Yeah.
And they've already
Exactly.
reworked that in the comic books that he comes back. It could be easily explained why he doesn't look the same, and you could cast somebody to replace him. And I mean, I feel like if you got a character who's really good and fans like it, if you can pull off the right recast, why not? I mean, why not recast roles and let somebody else play them? I mean, if you're gonna try to rehash the same old franchises over and over again, why not try to at least carry them on with characters that are already established?
No, I agree with you, and I think that as nice as it is that they have retired, quote unquote, the character. Maybe I'm just a cynical bastard, but I don't think the character is actually retired for good. They'll bring it back at some point after enough time has passed between Chadwick Boseman's death and whatever they decide. They'll figure out a way to make it palatable to the audience, and it'll be fine. Like they'll figure out a way to do it, and they will do it because if I know anything about these studios, it's that it doesn't matter what happens. If there's money on the table, they're not going to leave it there.
Again,
so no, I was just going to reiterate that again, like I just wish that there were like where's like the new generation of action stars.
I think right now with action movies in general is that studios are in this loop right now where you have certain things out there that are kind of a sure thing success. Superhero movies.
Yeah.
It has to be a really piss poor movie to not make double or triple its budget back. Most of them are at the point where they're $1 billion franchises. And if you can throw $200 or $300 million at a project and then turn that to like $1.2 billion, sign up for that every day of the week. I get it. I mean, it's money. I don't want to say it's easy money.
Yeah.
But like,
sure,
all the back work on the back end is already done. Like those stories already exist. They don't have to go to a writer and go, we want you to create this character out of thin air. The character's there. It's established. People know who it is. And there's so many stories for this character that are already there on paper. I get it. Like, that's a sure thing. But I'm with you. Like, I feel like I wish studios would take a chance and try some of these characters out there, because obviously people are still writing them. I don't believe for a second that people aren't writing these characters. I just think studios are trying to avoid them like the plague. And then you get a studio that takes a chance on a movie like John Wick. Not an established character, an actor that, while I love Keanu Reeves, even he will admit that before John Wick come out, his career was like drastically on the downswoop. He said in an interview like he wasn't getting phone calls anymore, like scripts were coming less and less frequent, and he was kind of contemplating like just hanging up the acting chops and the acting boots and just doing whatever. Because I mean, it's not like the guy needs money, but then along come this script and he decided to take it, and boom, now his career's huge. Like every time I see his name somewhere, it's like Keanu Reeves is attached to do this, or in talks to do that, or in talks to do that. So
I mean, you could make the argument that I know there's a new Matrix movie in the pipeline. I don't know if it's like finished filming or whatever, but you could make the argument that we don't get another Matrix movie without the success of the John Wick franchise.
We absolutely don't get another Matrix movie. Now, here's the thing. Some might say, I might be in this camp. I hate to make anybody mad. that we really didn't need a Matrix 4 movie. That's just...
But again, like what we're talking about, this is like a franchise that is going to be most likely a reliable moneymaker, and that's what studios want. Unless you're like, the only studio I can think of, and I don't know how many action movies they do, is A24. Like they're taking chances, whether it's like Uncut Gems, Midsummer, the other stuff that they've done, that's cool. But like I need A24 to put out some action movies if they haven't already. I guess I'll have to look that up after the pod. But I want some new stuff, some new stars, some new people. I don't want 79-year-old Harrison Ford action hero.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about this, and I think the people are like, there's actors out there that have the chops to do, to change over and do action movies that and that's not what they do now currently. The biggest problem with that, I think, for a lot of them is it's just such a risk to their career. If they attach their name to this huge action vehicle and it flops, that could be it for some of them. I mean, there's some of them that have a little better name, maybe, who could overcome something, But like you look at somebody like Tom Holland, for instance, this young kid, he's a rising star. He would have to, at this point in his career, attach his name to several turds before he would be unbankable. But you take somebody who's like, roughly his age, maybe even a much better actor, but has only done like small roles and indie stuff. One turd could be like the difference between doing a movie next year or working at like, a grocery store. So, I mean, it's hard. I think what they should start doing is they should start trying to look maybe at some established actors who maybe have some name recognition already, but who maybe don't have as much to lose. Again, we've mentioned this before in the past, going back to Mel Gibson. I think his son Milo is a great actor. Is he like a Leonardo DiCaprio? Is he going to win like, best actor for like a drama? I don't know. I don't know if he's that good, but he's, a little taller than his dad, and he's stocky. He's in good shape. He's a good looking guy. And he does action movies. He does them really well. I've seen a couple of his movies, and he's a very good comparable actor. Somebody get a studio to take a risk on that guy. Like, put a movie on his shoulders. Like, the name recognition alone is going to bring that movie up some.
Right.
And there are actors out there, like I said, Patrick Schwarzenegger.
I would think so.
There's other people out there who are acting, but, either for their own reasonings, they're not going after these roles, or Hollywood just doesn't want to look at them. I kind of get it with Milo Gibson. His dad's kind of like radioactive. So I get it, which is a shame, man, because if you watch his movies, like, I can see him playing a bunch of characters. We talked about this before. Like, Marvel's going to have to recast Wolverine. I think he's a dead ringer to play Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
Dead ringer. He's like 5'8", 5'9". So he'd be the shortest actor to ever play the role, because Hugh Jackman's like 6'2.5". But he looks the part. He's stocky. He's short. He's really good at playing a gruff, brooding hero, dude. And he's like 29 or 30 years old.
Right.
Like, sign him up now. Marvel, like, lock that dude into like a 15 movie deal, and start putting. Seriously, like, that's one thing I hate about like recasting roles. Like, when Hugh Jackman did Logan, I don't know, how much you were paying attention to like people talking about it, but like the first things I heard, like, okay, well, now they're gonna have to recast the role. Whose name starts coming out immediately? Tom Hardy. We need Tom Hardy. Look, well, I
thought you were going to say Glenn Danzig.
And remember what he said. He'd play it way less gay.
That is what he said.
Oh, God.
What a fucking dipshit that guy is.
Yeah, I like his music, too.
Love his music.
He's a douchey little leprechaun.
Yeah. It's a shame. Indeed.
They started screaming Tom Hardy. And don't get me wrong, I love Tom Hardy as an actor. I think he's terrific. But the guy's like 39, 40 now.
Yeah.
Why do you want to sign a 40-year-old actor to a contract to play an action star that he's not going to want to play in 5 years? Why? I get the name.
Yeah. I mean, in his specific case, I think that he's like an artist. Like he makes like very good choices. I think as far as like the stuff that he chooses to do. I just couldn't see him doing any kind of like super. I mean, I know he played Bane in one of the Batman movies, but I just couldn't see a guy like him who like very clearly like cares about his work and like wants to do like cool stuff. Agree to that. So to your point, get somebody younger and who's like looking to make a name for themselves a little bit, but maybe has
I don't know if
like
you're
a little
aware,
bit of name recognition.
He is another comic book hero though. He plays Venom in the Sonyverse.
Okay.
But I watched an
Okay.
interview of him. The only reason he even played that character was because of his kids. Like Sony called and were like, "Hey, we really want you
Yeah.
for this role," and he was like, "No, I'm not interested. I don't want to do any comic book roles anymore." And he just, in passing, mentioned it to his son, and his son like lost his fucking mind. So Tom Hardy called him back and was like, "All right, I'll do it." So he didn't even want to do the role. He just took it for his
Yeah.
kid. But I mean, like, even then, like, doing a movie like this is not hurting his career. He's still doing tons of indie shit and, all these really cool projects. And that's not bothering him. But again,
Right.
the dude's in his, I want to say he's got to be 40 now. He's got to be over 40. I don't know for sure, but he's got to be. So, like, again, why cast a 40-something-year-old to do this role? Doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it. I just don't like it.
Yeah, needs to get younger.
See?
Tom Hardy is
I thought he was
43,
like-
by the way. So
Right, I thought he was like 39 or 40.
doing
like,
our due diligence
door.
there.
He's like a couple steps in the door. Like that's as much as I love his movies, that's not the guy you want to tag and lock into a character who, I mean, let's face it, Hugh Jackman took the role of Wolverine when he was like 33, and he played it up until he was 47, which is a long time. He was in a bunch of movies. And as far as like a whole generation is, he is that character. But that character is such a cash cow, it's going to have to be recast. Yeah. Why don't you put somebody in it that you can have some real longevity out of? Somebody who's going to play that role for like 15, 20 years. Don't cast somebody who you're going to have to recast in 5 years. It just doesn't make any sense.
Agreed. Well, that was a nice little inside baseball discussion.
We got way off
but I think that it's about that time. That's okay. We're having fun. It's time to put a bow on this one and move on to our fists
I went first
rating.
Time, so you go first.
Now, I'm going to go first. So, Predator 2, I might get canceled for this, but I'm going to give it a higher fists rating than I did the first Predator. I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it more. And, we talked about this on the pod last week, but I understand like why you gave the first Predator the rating you did. You had a very sweet story with your uncle and how you discovered this movie and how it really just kind of like kindled your love for action movies going forward. And that probably wouldn't be here right now talking about this shit if it weren't for that fateful day. So for me, not really having any of that, kind of just like watching these movies more or less in a vacuum as standalone pieces of cinema. As far as my personal tastes go and what I like in action movies, Predator 2 has more of what I like than Predator 1. So I'm going to give it 4 fists.
All right, no, that's fair. That's fair. And I think your summation there is good. Like basically the way you sum all that up makes sense. I mean, overall, like I said, again, I think it's a better movie than Predator 1. But for me, like you said, the nostalgia and like the emotional connection to Predator 1, to me, makes it a better movie. And I can't remember what I rated Predator 1. Did I give it a 5? I think I gave it a 5.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Predator 2 a 4.5 fist. Because I think it's a very exceptional movie.
All right.
I think it's a really bad thing that it was panned as being so bad by critics and kind of swept under the rug. Like, I've talked to people who are fans of like Predator. Like they've seen Predator 1. They've seen like Predators and the Predator and like all the Predator versus Alien shit that come out. They've seen all those movies. And I've been like, yeah, have you seen Predator 2? And they're like, Predator 2, what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, the original Predator's got a sequel that come out a couple years after. They're like, I didn't know that. Yeah, dude, it's there. And I think I said this to somebody, and they went back and watched it. And like, oh, dude, that movie was awesome. It was way better than any of the other sequels. And I was like, yeah, like it's there. Give it some love. So I don't know, man. Like we could go on about like, was it racism? Was it bad marketing? Did it go up against bigger movies that just kind of like eclipsed it? I mean, because that happens. There's movies that come out at the same time as other movies, and they just cover it up.
Sure.
So that happens. I don't know because I wasn't, going to movies like that back then. So I don't know what the deal was. I can't remember what was out next to it, but I think it's a shame, and I think it's a good movie. So for that reason, it's a 4.5 fister for me. I think people would argue that that's too high for it, that it's a 2 or 3 fist movie, but I enjoy it. Well written and entertaining. It's another one of those movies that if I watched once a year, I would never be like, fucking turn the channel. I would sit there and watch. So,
sure, it definitely has like rewatch value, which I think is super important for a movie like this. I mean, there are like better movies that I only need to watch once, right? Like Oscar contender type movies, or even not so much, but like, like just other movies that are technically better written, better acted, all of the above. But it's not a movie that you feel like you need to go back to and rewatch, But this one's like a classic popcorn action flick. You just like sit back, you can enjoy it, you can laugh at the funny quotes, you can enjoy the fight scenes. Yeah, there's a lot to like, and I think it's eminently rewatchable, which for this genre is very important. So good ratings all around for Predator 2. And let's say goodnight, and we'll talk to all of you in a couple of weeks. Don't forget, Going Commando Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Check out our Discord as well. And if you want to email us, goingcommandopod@gmail.com. Good night, folks.